Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me how. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, let's do it now. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, you're the one that makes fishing so much fun. Well, I woke up this morning and I headed for my pond. Meet Mr. Pond Boss, yeah, we're gonna chase us some.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk here, checking in with you on this Wednesday night on our Facebook Live broadcast. I see Dick Tabert's checking in. Dick knows the drill. So we'll go over that here in a minute. I want to thank you for joining. I see we've got 4 people on. Now here's the thing, I like to welcome everybody. Like last week, I didn't realize that Mike Garcia was on until I went back and looked at the video. So I'd love to acknowledge that you're here and say hello to you. But I see we got 7 people on, and I see where there is 1. So I don't want to overlook anybody, but I do want to let you know that I want to acknowledge your presence. You know, and we got 9 guys up. Leanne's on, looks like. So here we go. I've got a pretty good topic lined up for you tonight. We've got, good gosh, I don't know what it's like where you are, but right now here it's getting in the 90s in the afternoons, and that's pretty darn warm. You know, and I want to talk about some of the things that happen when a pond gets warm, and I also want you to see some of the things that you can learn about and understand about things that are external that affect your ponds and affect the way that you think about your ponds. So let's see here. We got Dick Tabert, John Funk, hello from Mid-Michigan, Troy Todd, Chris Rigoni, Mustafa Fatih Ozerd. Hey, what's going on, man? And there's our famous taxidermist, Brendan. Good evening, Brendan. Glad you're on. 82 and sunny in Michigan. It's in the 90s here, and we've had some rain. And, you know, today's topic, I want to talk about some of the things that you may not even think about that can affect your ponds and the way that your ponds behave. So, I want to get into that. Now, of course, here's the game. Here's the rules. I want everybody to subscribe to Pond Boss, and this is the brand new issue, just out, fresh off the presses. And there's some outstanding stories in here. There's one about the histories of pond management, which is pretty darn cool. Things to think about, like storing your stuff. You don't think about that. How to balance your seasons. I mean, there's some pretty cool stories in here. And I promise you, there's some nuggets. Now, this is $35 a year. Basil Savage on board from Southern Oklahoma around Medill. John Lauer, thanks for all the info. You're welcome, man. Glad you're on board. But I do want to implore you, if you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss, please do. $35 a year. And this is the economy that fuels things like this, where we can afford to be able to come and do it. And here's what I want you to do. Click like, which, you know, likes probably don't matter that much to Facebook anymore, but they matter to me because that way I can see that you're there later on when I go back and analyze this video. And please put hashtag PondBossMagazine. But the most important thing is to share this video to your timeline, your new to your Facebook page. Now, the reason that's important is we want to build a bigger audience. If we can build a bigger audience, then we can keep doing this. You just got to get the word out, because my #1 goal is to teach you what you need to know, followed by my #1 goal of getting more subscribers to Pond Boss so we can keep doing it. Jacob West, he's got it. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. You guys do that. Jim Fritchie from middle of Texas. Brian Ritter from Louisville, Kentucky. Elmo, Jim Liner. We're going to come see you the week right before June 1, whatever that is, 28, 29, 30 through there. We're going to head over, and that's the spot, that's the place that Ray Scott used to own. He recently sold it. We're going to go work on those lakes. Jason Nepstad is on. Now, just to kind of give you some ideas about the resource that you have here at your beck and call, is pondboss.com is a great resource. We've got the Ask the Boss forum where you can go on live and get a question answered. Doesn't cost anything to join. We're not going to be dunning you to do anything other than subscribe to the magazine, which is a good thing for everybody. Danny Tolliver, good to see you. Also on pondboss.com, we've got quite a few free articles. We've got quite a few free videos. We've got links to all the past Facebook Live broadcasts that we've also uploaded to YouTube, so you can access those. Now, you know, this Facebook page is also loaded with good information, and for you, it's all free. You know, for me, it's 39 years worth of sharing what I know, and I'm fine with that because I truly believe that with somewhere between 4.5 and 6.5 million private ponds and lakes in these United States, that the more that you know to be better stewards, the better off we all are. You know, and we're all students. Trust me, I'm learning more now than I ever thought I wanted to, and it's fun. So, also, we've got several books that are available on the Pond Boss store. Here's one, Perfect Pond, Want One. This is a book that I wrote that helps guide people who are getting ready to buy land, some things to think about that you wouldn't be thinking about. It also goes through some of the main tips about how to design a pond. You know what you need to do to think about building it and manage it and stock it. I mean, we've got all kinds of, for those of you that can't read, we have pictures. That's me. You know, I wrote this book and I think I read it once. Mike Otto's book, Just Add Water. This is 40-year compilation of his life history. You know, and there's some outstanding imagery in here. This is a great book. 30 bucks. 30 bucks, you know. This was 20. These things can help you help yourselves to be better stewards. Let's see. Oh, hey, John Henry, you know what? I forgot to announce last week that you won the mug and the cap. And which, by the way, when you share this video to your timeline and you click like and you put in hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, that makes you eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss cap and a Pond Boss mug. So you can help spread the word. And tonight's winner is Joanne Pelifant. And I don't see her on yet, but I got a feeling she'll be here in a minute because she loves this show as much as we do to produce it. So you know what? Let's jump into the topic. Our taxidermist Brendan, great magazine, very informative. I put them in my shop for all my fish customers to see. They love it. That's great. Hey, you know what? If any of you want, like Brendan, where you've got a business, if you want a stack of subscription cards, send an email to info@pondboss.com, and I'll make sure that Leanne knows to send out some cards that you can lay out there. And you know, I'll never forget what Ray Scott told me one time. He says, "Hey Bob, you know, you're the best fisheries biologist in America. Don't you think I'm the best lake designer in America?" He said, "You know what? I love telling people about you, and I want you to love telling people about me. So me bragging about you is better than me bragging about me, and you bragging about me is better than me bragging about me." So did that work out right? Bottom line is help us spread the word. Let's see, John Lauer, I'm putting in a pond right now, so all this info is appreciated. Well, you're going to get some more of it tonight. Fred Bingaman is on the mend and on this broadcast from all the way from Brownstown, Illinois. Hello, Fred. Always good to see a great friend. Let's kind of jump into some of this stuff. Now, remember, mark your calendars, put in a reminder on your Facebook page. May 21, which is next Monday, I will be in Missouri, west of St. Louis at Gray Summit at the Purina Mills Farm, their research farm. And I've just helped them renovate a 6-acre lake, and we've stocked it with fish, and they're feeding fish. And they're doing some pretty cool research there to improve their fish foods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from next Wednesday night to Monday night to do this live broadcast, live from the Purina Farm. And we're going to have the farm manager, Kurt Schultz. We're going to have some of their research scientists. And you can have a free-for-all. You can ask them all kinds of questions. And, of course, I'm going to moderate those questions and guide them as well. So please tune in May 21. Speaking of Purina, I want to thank Purina Aquamax Fish Food for sponsoring this show. They help foot the bill some, as does Texas Hunter Products. Now, spend a little time on Texas Hunter's product line website. Now, they were recently bought out by Pradco, but I'm going to tell you, Texas Hunter has got some outstanding hunting blinds, wildlife feeders. They've got the best fish feeders on the market, but one of my favorite things about Texas Hunter is their customer service. So when you get ready to buy a fish feeder, let us know, or go straight to them, either way, and jump in, and they've got products you can use, I promise. Hey, Amber Young is on. Glad you're joining us. Well, tonight's topic are external forces that affect your ponds, and what I wrote down to talk about is things like droughts and floods, predators, things like that. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time, and of course your questions are going to be much appreciated. The things I want you to know is, I think the first most important point is that when we get water in our pond, we don't keep it, we borrow it. So part of our jobs as good stewards is to take good care of that water. You know, keep it healthy, keep it clean. Don't do things that pollute it. You know, don't add too much nutrient loads. Manage the aquatic plants, manage the fishery, the whole bit. You know, and there's a lot to that, but the very fundamental, simple principles is that you understand that we only borrow water. We don't keep it. Now, I'll never forget. Now, here's something else that's important. If you're not in a drought, you will be. Every drought ends with a flood. Think about that. Every single drought ends with a flood. You don't end a drought with a 3-inch rain or a 2-inch rain or a normal 4-inch rain. Every single drought ends with a flood. Just talk to those folks in California that were dealing with mudslides. You know, come back and look at where we were in 2015 here in North Texas, Southern Oklahoma, Northeast, Northwest Texas. You know, we were in a three-year drought, and we got 40 inches of rain in 40 days. It flooded incessantly. You know, so if you're not in a drought, you will be. And every drought ends with a flood. So embed that in your brain and know that. Now, here's what happens. Hey, Marta, my next door neighbor is there. John Mashburn is on board. Tom Davis. Hi, Tom. The thing about droughts, here's how a drought affects your ponds. Now, the most obvious way that a drought affects a pond is water goes away. If you think about it, when I say that we borrow water, what that truly means to you is water seeks the path of least resistance. Water is one of those compounds that seeps through the soils, or it can go out the bottom of a pond. It can flow laterally through gravel veins or sand or whatever, but it can also go vertically. It can go straight up into the clouds through evaporation. Now, if in August, September, in states like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, even in Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado, in those states, now the further east we go, this is mitigated somewhat, I'm going to tell you. But what happens is you can have, on a day where it's 98 degrees outside and humidity is less than 30%, a half an inch of water can go into the clouds every day. So just do the math on that. Now, what typically happens on a hot summer day is you'll lose 1/4 of an inch of water. Now, here's a number you got to remember. You got to remember that 1 acre, 1 inch deep is 27,000 gallons. Write that down and think about that. And then you can begin to understand what that truly means to you. There's Gato Ventura. Hello, Gato. Another celebrity joining us tonight. That's great. Let's see, Clint Loveday. Hi, Clint. Wanda J. Duff Pullman. Clint Loveday, I got my first issue last week. I can't believe all the great info and great articles. Hey, thanks for sharing that, because we really do work hard to produce good articles. John Henry, asked you a couple of weeks about fathead minnows. I just about figured out my fatheads that I bought are actually golden shiners, and I have 1 million 3 to 5 inches in my 3/4 acre pond with only brim and catfish. Really don't want to add bass or crappie, but should I try to thin them down, or will the brim do it when they get established better? You know what? I'll hit that question in a minute. Let's see, Roy Worthy, we're in drought. Yes, you are in West Texas, absolutely. So what happens, here's what happens to a pond, Roy, in West Texas, because you guys are in called an extreme drought where you are in West Texas. I'm not quite sure where you are, but anywhere west of Childress, you know, the whole panhandle of Texas, Midland, Odessa, going west, you guys are in a serious drought. Christy Hartzell, good to see you. Anthony Abate from Chicago, Illinois. Well, here's what happens in a drought condition. When you've got 1/2 inch or even 1/4 of an inch of water leaving every day through the clouds, remember this, the only thing that leaves the pond is water. Now, water is the universal solvent. That's what scientists call it. Anything that can dissolve into water will dissolve into water. And if you're in an area where there's a lot of minerals, those minerals dissolve into water. So to kind of keep this concept pretty simple, what happens is that when you've got, let's say you've got 500,000 gallons of water and you've got 100 parts per million lime, calcium carbonate dissolved in the water. And over a span of times, be it 6 months or a year, half the volume of water evaporates and goes into the clouds and disappears. That means that your parts per million of limestone or calcium carbonate doubles. So the more water that evaporates, the more concentrated those metals and minerals that are dissolved into your water become. And here's a story, true story that happened a number of years ago, and it's just impaled in my brain. I delivered a few fish to a guy out near Post, Texas, on the Cap Rock in the Llano Estacado area, and he built a small pond by his house and filled it with a well. So he stocked a bunch of fish in there and then drove out to his ranch because he wanted me to look at a few ponds about 20 miles out of town. So we drove up into the high plains and got to looking at some ponds, and there was one pond, man, that was probably a fourth of the water in it than it needed, and it had evaporated out. But off in the distance, not too far away, was a big green cloud line of thunderstorms coming right at us. This was in April of 1992, as I recall. And I mean, when that storm came through, it was a floater. We drove into his barn, put my truck in there and his truck, and you couldn't talk to each other because of the hail banging on the metal roof of that barn. Well, in a period of about 20 minutes, there were 4 inches of rain, and I mean, it was coming down so fast you couldn't see. The hailstones were big as golf balls. They were hitting the ground and bouncing. A lot of times, hail hits the ground in bursts, but these were hailstones that were solid ice that were bouncing. The storm passed, moved east, which was the direction I was getting ready to go, and we drove along the gravel road and came to the pond that was a quarter full 30 minutes before. Now it was completely full, totally full, with a layer of ice floating on top of it. Those golf ball sized hailstones clogged up his spillway, bunched up together, and we just sat there for an hour watching. And it didn't take long as fish were coming to the surface and they were piping for air. And if I didn't need to leave, I would have stuck around and talked to him. But what happened was his fish died. They died for 2 reasons. One was because his metals and minerals went from a high concentration and were rapidly diluted by that heavy rain. So if they were 500 parts per million, they went to 50 parts per million or 100 parts per million. And that was a great shock. The pH changed, the mineral content, the metal content, but probably what affected him more was the temperature went from, probably the low 80s to the low 50s in 30 minutes with all those hailstones. And that killed his fish. Now his pond at the house didn't suffer that because it was full of water, and he had the well on, and the well helped mitigate the volume of hail that hit it. The hail that hit the ranch pond flowed into it in a big part, coming off the fields and pastures. So my take-home point in a drought is that it's a good idea to check your water chemistry during a drought just to see how it's changing. It costs $25 to send a sample in to a lab and find out your pH, alkalinity, hardness, the very basic metals and minerals, magnesium, iron, calcium, calcium carbonate, things like that, which that might not mean much to you, but it means a lot to guys like me that are going to help you figure these things out. Hello, Nick Foster. Good to see you. Remind everybody, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments. Click like. But the biggest deal to help us beat, win, learn, take advantage of the Facebook algorithms is to share this and interact with us. Share it to your timeline and interact with us if you don't mind. So now, that's how a drought affects you. Now, how does a flood affect? A flood affects because now, let's just look at Hurricane Harvey back last fall, late summer. I think it was in August. I did the math on this. When Hurricane Harvey came on shore near Corpus Christi, Rockport, Port Aransas, then circled around and hovered over Houston, it dumped somewhere in the neighborhood of 37 trillion gallons of water on that area. And I did the math. That was enough water to kind of give you some perspective. That was enough water to supply every human on the planet 5,000 gallons of water. That was enough water to supply every single person in the United States their minimum monthly water allotment of 3,000 gallons per month for a year. That's a lot of water. That's a major flood. Now, what happens during a flood is, yes, the water chemistry changes, but your fish also move around. So you got to understand how that works, because most of the time fish like to move upstream and they will intermingle. They'll move from your pond to the neighbor's pond. A lot of people think they move downstream, and some of the weaker, smaller fish and younger fish probably do that. but the majority of the fish that do move are moving upstream. So you need to understand that. We had a few questions. You know what? Let me go ahead and tackle some of these questions that are coming across here. Let's go back to John Henry here. Okay, I have 1 million 3 to 5 inch golden shiners. Okay, first thing is we're not sure whether they're golden shiners or they're fatheads. Now, if they're 3 to 5 inches long, we can pretty well assume they're not fathead minnows. Odds are pretty high, especially if you bought them from a bait store, that they're golden shiners. Now, the thing about golden shiners is they live maybe 2 years. That's their average lifespan. But they're top of the line predators limited by their mouth size. So a shiner that's about this long, 3 inches long or so, its mouth is only about so big. But it's going to be feeding on insects and fish and live bugs and things like that it can catch that your other fish would ordinarily feed on. You know, so your question is you only have brim and catfish, but you don't say what kind of brim. Okay, brim, let me tell you folks this. Brim, to me, is like saying cattle. You know, there's Angus, there's Herefords, there's Santa Gertrudis, you know, there's Jerseys, Holsteins. There's a wide variety of cattle, and they all serve a different purpose. You know, Angus are good beef cattle, Holsteins are dairy cattle. Well, there's a parallel here with brim. Brim is the generic word for different species of sunfish. So if I know what kind of brim you've got, if you've got bluegill, I'm going to tell you something. But if you've got hybrid sunfish, I'm going to tell you something different. So here's what I am going to tell you. If you don't want to add bass and you don't want to add crappie, and you want to try to deplete the number of golden shiners, when your catfish get bigger, they'll eat some golden shiners. Now, the catch-22 is channel catfish are not quite as aggressive predators as are largemouth bass. So they're not going to wipe out your shiners nearly as quickly. But what you can do is if you'll feed those shiners, just go buy the cheapest Purina catfish food you can find, you know, $30 a bag or whatever. A 50-pound bag will feed a lot of shiners for a long time. Get accustomed to eating that fish food. Then buy or build some traps and start trapping the shiners. And see if you can sell them to a local bait dealer or find something you can do with those shiners, and because somebody can use them. So I would trap them. Now, because if you don't really want to have bass, don't stock bass. I wouldn't stock crappie under any circumstances in a small pond like that, because then you're going to trade problems. Even though the crappie might help you control some of those shiners, then you're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of runaway crappie that are maybe 3 inches long and 4 or 5 years down the road, about as thick as a postage stamp, and nobody's growing. So I wouldn't do that. Let's see here. Let me hit a couple. There were some questions that came on the Facebook page earlier. Joel Hagenswold, can we talk about otters? Yes, we can. Carson Seville, otters. My pond is next to a river. How would you handle river flooding? It's flooded once in 20 years, but still a chance. So here's what I'm going to tell you. We've covered a little bit about droughts, a little bit about floods. Your take-home points tonight. Good evening, Nick Foster. Your take-home point tonight is, okay, John Henry, copper-nosed bluegill. Okay, John, copper-nosed bluegill reproduce a lot and fast. So at some point with the copper-nosed bluegill, you're either going to start trapping them or you're going to want a few bass. Now, you can put single-sex bass in there. You can put some males or put some females in there, and they're going to help you control those bluegills as well as those shiners. So since you have a sunfish that reproduces prolifically, I would suggest that you put in a 3/4 acre pond, say 5 male largemouth bass. Now, work with somebody that can tell the difference between a male and a female. I mean, it's not so simple as spread their little fins and looking. There's a little more to it than that. But that's what I would try to do. Sheridan Ashmore, good evening, Bob on the road now. Catch a show, perfect. Chelsea Cantrell, hey Chelsea, good to see you from last week. Glad to know you're on board here. The John Mashburn's got a question. I'm going to hit that here in just a minute, John. I do want to talk about predators, and I learn a lot all the time, and just coupled with what I've gained from experience, it's just so much fun to be able to absorb new knowledge, and then, you know, the light bulb goes off and it clicks. Here's one of those light bulb moments. I've had the privilege and opportunity to manage Richmond Mill Lake, home of the Kingfisher Society, in Laurinburg, North Carolina, since 2005. Well, we took a lake there that was pretty much a lemon, and it wasn't thriving at all, and it couldn't. The water overflows the spillways 7 to 10,000 gallons a minute. Acid water, just a fraction of a point above the lower lethal limit for fish to reproduce, meaning fish could still reproduce, but there was no food in it, no nutrients, no minerals, no metals. It was pretty sterile water. So, yes, hey, Jacob, I'm ready to go to Kingfisher. Let's talk in the next few days because we're going to set that up for November. And we're going to go. And I'm ready to hammer that date down and get that locked in on the calendar. But anyway, what happened in that lake was we knew that the lake would not help itself, so the property owner, Dr. Jim Morgan, decided that we would feed the lake, and that's when we worked with Purina Mills to develop and fine-tune their fish foods, because finally there was a lake that was going to be completely dependent on feeding out of a box and out of a bag. Well, it worked outstanding, and we grew some huge fish that are there to this day. If you've never been there, that is a bucket list trip, I promise. Kingfisher Society is the website. Just look up Kingfisher Society and start looking at some pictures, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Hey, Nick Foster, good evening. If I didn't greet you, I think I greeted you. Things are fast-paced during this hour. But where I was going is that before long, as that lake began to become productive, it started to far exceed what nature would have done. And the cool thing about it, I mean, not only were we growing some bluegills bigger than 2 pounds, and Bruce Condello's caught a 3-pound, 4-ounce bluegill, we had the fat, chunky bass growing, plus another 15 different species of fish that live in that lake naturally. So the food chain was propping up the entire lake and making it productive. Nature doesn't like that. Nature doesn't like us or you or me to go out and create something that is more abundant than what nature would do. And nature always responds to that. So here's what I want you to know about that tonight. If you create a bounty, nature wants to take that bounty away. And here's what happened at Kingfisher Society. And it was actually pretty cool. It wasn't long before, I'm going to say probably in the latter part of the second year, there's this gigantic pond cypress tree that, when I say gigantic, it was probably 60 feet tall, but wasn't any bigger than 12 inches in diameter halfway up. No nutrients, don't grow big trees, and those pond cypress trees, even though they'd been growing there since 1840, you know, they just weren't that huge. Now, base is huge. Well, there was an osprey nest that was built in the top of that tree. And to this day, there's a nesting pair of ospreys. There's bald eagles. Those guys have sent me pictures of an alligator that made its way into that lake in Laurinburg, North Carolina, which isn't common. But the thing that really struck me is about, a year into the project, we started noticing that a bunch of the feed was going away. So, look at there's Ashton Chandler, my daughter-in-law, Chris Blood, Trana Madonna. Hey, Trana Madonna. Trana Smith, glad you're there. Well, what we started seeing was that some of the feeders were spitting out more feed than others. So we set up some game cameras, and what would happen, all the feeders are set on platforms in that lake. There's Kerry Cooper Wood. Hey, Kerry, my longtime friend. Well, what was going on was raccoons were swimming out in the lake, climbing up on those platforms, hitting the feeder spinners, and eating fish food. So those guys devised some traps where they could trap some raccoons, and in 2 weeks they caught 98 raccoons that were swimming out eating fish food. So here's your take-home point. When you create a bounty of anything, whether it's wildlife or whether it's a fishery, once you start to produce more than what nature would do, there's going to be a pushback. Now, the pushback may be in predators. It may be later on the lake wound up with otters. Those guys had to battle otters and trap them and remove them, and cormorants, pelicans. When you start to create a bounty, nature's going to figure out how to start taking some of that away from you. Now, in a lake other than Richmond Mill Lake that flows so much water, if we're trying to produce a whole lot of fish, the way that nature pushes back is the water quality deteriorates. And when that happens, then you've got another different problem. So you've got to be aware of that. So that's the kind of things, when you've got abundance, then nature's going to want to take that from you. When you have a bounty, nature's going to want you to share that. And you need to know that so you can be prepared for it. Hey, Greg Grimes, my good friend, fisheries biologist from Georgia. Glad to see you. Let's see now. Another question we had here. This is from Cindy O'Callaghan Lemaire. That sounds like a good Irish-French name. Will there be any discussion on how to keep ponds clean? We just moved and the pond is being overrun with grass and algae. Yeah, I'll tell you how to do that. The best way to keep a pond clean is to keep the water clean. The best way to keep water clean is to keep it moving. And in this case, for ponds, aeration. Aeration is an outstanding choice. Now, if you have electricity, you go one direction. If you don't have electricity, you go another. So just send us an email, info@pondballs.com, or call our office number, and we've got a resource guide just jam-packed full of vendors that are ready to help you. We'll refer somebody to you that can help you. So, yes, the best way to keep a pond clean is to keep the water moving. Now, here's the caveat. This time of year, if you've already got aquatic plants, aeration won't kill aquatic plants. Now, what aeration does is it allows water to be moving, and the more the water moves, the more autonomous it is. The more autonomous it is, the more predictable it is, and the less likely you're going to be dealing with runaway aquatic plants. I see Stephen Barden from Texas Pro Lake Management. Hey, Stephen. And Scott Lindsay. Hey, man. So now let's see. I'm going to circle back down here and go find John Mashburn's question. Here it is. He said, I have a small pond, 50-foot circle, maybe 4 to 6 feet deep at the center, mostly a watering hole for wildlife, but I'd like to keep it clean as it gets dingy during the warmer months. I would like to throw a couple of fish into it, as well as some oxygen-producing plants. Suggestions? P.S. I'll be at work, so I'll have to catch the answer in the morning. I'll talk slow. All right. John Mashburn, here's what you need to do. If you can aerate it, aerate it. Now that's not necessarily going to take away the dinginess. You got to find out why it's dingy. Is it dingy because there's mud in it and it's suspended? Is it dingy because it's eutrophic? Oh, let's look that word up. Eutrophic means a pond is aging or a lake is aging. They all do that. And you need to expect that. As the pond ages, its water changes. So, some oxygen. All plants that live in water produce oxygen as long as the sun shines. So, I'm a big proponent of native aquatic plants. Now, since your pond is a watering hole for wildlife, you don't really want it to get clogged up with aquatic plants, but keep in mind that when you have the proper habitat for plants, they're going to grow. The proper habitat for plants means that there's sunlight penetration to where they are, that there's food for them, and the temperature's right. When you have all those things come together, plants are going to grow. Now, just do your best to learn about what the native plants are, the different species, and that's the ones that you want to use. So, now that you're at work and you know that, you can sure look at that tomorrow and see if you can figure that out. Now, some fish, if you're not interested in sport fish or fish that you can look at and admire, I would at least look at some fish that feed on mosquito larvae, things like that, which those fathead minnows are a good choice for that, as long as there's not other fish that can eat them. Gambusia, depending on where you are, Gambusia, use native plants. Like in North Carolina, I wouldn't stock Gambusia, but I'd sure put top minnows in there. So there's different kinds of fish to help you accomplish whatever it is you want to do. Hey, there's John Wilson. Hey, John, good to see you, buddy. So I'm going to scroll down here and see what else is going on. All right, let's see here. Holy cow, a lot of people have joined in. Hello, Stephen. Good evening. John Wilson. Gato Ventura. Piggybacking a current topic, can you talk about tilapia for algae control in ponds down south? I've heard it helps, but haven't personally experienced it. Sure, you bet. We use tilapia. Matter of fact, we're right in the middle, or actually toward the tail end of stocking tilapia. Tilapia are very effective algae eaters. Now, here's the thing about tilapia. Don't use them where they won't die. I see Jose Latorre come on. Jose don't need to stock tilapia down in South Florida because you trade problems. But if we draw a line, say through Waco, Texas, through Shreveport, Louisiana, Jackson, Mississippi, and then cut down and go through Atlanta, Georgia, from that line north where it's legal, man, I'm all for stocking tilapia. Yes, they do eat algae. Now, we in Texas, we have to use Tilapia Mozambique, which die when the water temperature hits 52 degrees. Now, early on, it was kind of a hard sell to convince people to stock tilapia, knowing they're going to die in the fall. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made, because here you've got an organic method to get rid of algae. And it's not so much the tilapia that you stock at 10 to 20 pounds per acre, at $10 to $15 a pound, depending on where you are. It's the babies. As the babies are born, the tilapia are mouth breeders. They'll spit the babies out, then the babies get up in that algae and they graze on that, and that's what they feed on. And we've had some outstanding results using Tilapia Mozambique. Now, you're kind of hearing me, I'm not waffling because I'm confident about that, but we don't use blue tilapia, we don't use Nautica, we don't use some of those other species. We are bound by Mozambique, and those work really, really well. Okay, let's see here. John Henry says John Mashberg is in Arkansas, Ozarks. That's part of my favorite country. So now, let's see here. Let's see if we can cover some more of these topics. Some of the external forces that affect your ponds. Here's a very important thing. Every time you do something, there's a reaction. Let's see, Elmo, Jim Liner, my tilapia died January 1st at 43 degrees. Well, that's because you probably have blue tilapia and you're in Alabama. And so the different species die at different temperatures. Let's see, Gato Ventura, native northern living in the south. Okay, there you go. Well, and that's what, Jim Liner, Elmo Liner on our feed here is when your tilapia died January the 1st, I mean, that you were lacking one cold front for them to live all year long. Well, on the surface, that sounds good, but I don't like it. I don't like it. I want them to go away. I don't want to have a whole bunch of 6 to 8 pound tilapia carrying over into a new year. Then they start competing for space. Then they start competing for food. And now there's something that's totally different that's changed the dynamics of the population of your fish. Some other external forces, good gosh, I was going somewhere. Let me think about it a minute. Oh, I know what it was. Every time you do something with a pond, every time you take an action, there will be a reaction. And part of your job with these external forces, such external forces means things like feeding fish, stocking fish, removing fish, adding fertilizer, changing a feeding program, adding water, killing plants. Every time you make a choice and do something with a pond, there's going to be a reaction. So you, at that point, become the external force. And part of your job is to be sure that you know the consequences of that choice before you make it. So, for example, I'll always remember I got a call from a pondmeister near El Campo, Texas, out west of Houston. And he's a dentist, and it's a weekend place. Well, he was upset because he'd had a bunch of bushy pondweed in his lake because the water's shallow. He had a lot of water, less than 3 feet deep. So he treated that bushy pondweed, and then within weeks, his pond was muddy. Well, we took our electric fishing boat down there and did an electric fishing survey, and come to find out he had a lot of gizzard shad because his pond or his lake is parallel to a creek. So not only is his lake shallow, but every time it flooded, the creek water would interact with his pond water, and that's where the gizzard shad came from. Let's see here. I'm going to switch gears just for a minute. Benjamin Garrett Mayfield. Hey, man, I'm glad to see you there. Let's see. Jim Liner says, yes, they are blue tilapia. They die every year at 40. That's right. Let's see. Chris Blood. I will, hey, Chris from Texas Hunter, I'll hit your deal here in a minute, and we'll talk about that. Todd Austin, hello. Well, anyway, what happened was we figured out that what happened when this dentist treated the aquatic plants and killed them, then that opened the lake up for gizzard shad to thrive. Gizzard shad, you know why they call them a gizzard shad? You may have heard me say this before, because they have a gizzard. So gizzard shad, as they mature and grow up, they love to root around in the mud, and that's what they do. And when they do that, they got to have shallow water, and when there's shallow water and there's mud, they stir it up. So that lake got stirred up. So what he decided to do was to draw the lake down a few feet to get the shallow water exposed over the winter, kill a bunch of the gizzard shad with a rotenone, which he did, but bring some heavy equipment in and rearrange some of those shallow areas and build some peninsulas and some islands and things to get more depth. So he did that, and he got rid of about half of his shallow water. Well, the lake filled back up, and the shallow water that was left vegetated because it was the right habitat for shallow water. Had everything it needed. Shallow water was producing more plants. So guess what he did? He treated it again. Gizzard Shad exploded. The consequences were his lake was muddy again. And at that point, he was pretty frustrated with it because he was really struggling to try to reach some kind of a balance and couldn't get it. So the moral of that story is when you get ready to do something externally, understand the consequences. For example, if you're going to stock tilapia in a lake, know that they eat algae, they reproduce prolifically. Tilapia Mozambique die at 52. Tilapia, blue tilapia, Nilotica die at 40 degrees. They're going to reproduce and help increase survival rates of bluegills. So of all those consequences, if all of them are good, then it's a good choice. If one of them is bad, think it through. If they don't die over the winter, that could be a bad choice. But it's your job to think that through before you do it. Same thing with fertilizing. I had a guy call me this week. He was really frustrated. He said, I have put in his 30-acre lake near Brownwood, Texas, Larry Hensley. Larry says, hey, I've put 55-gallon barrels of 1034-0 fertilizer in my lake, and the visibility is still 6 feet deep. I put 165 gallons of fertilizer in my lake, and the water clarity is still 6 feet deep. Now the Eurasian water milfoil is filling it up. What do I do? Well, I said, well, your options are fertilize just a little bit more and try to get a good bloom, but measure your visibility. Because he said it was somewhere between 6 and 8 feet. I said, measure your visibility. You need to know it. You need to know what it is. Well, he called me back tonight, and his visibility was 34 inches. Don't fertilize anymore. That's a perfect visibility depth. So there's consequences. All right, I'm going to go back to Chris Blood here. Chris says, hey, Bob, what's the best way someone can get in touch with you to order those tilapia or other forage fish and help with weed control in your lake? You know, I spend so much time on this thing just telling you what you can do, but just know that you can call our office, and we're happy to help. Now, you know, keep in mind, I really have two businesses. I've got Pond Boss Magazine, which comes out every other month, and that's what I'm really trying to promote here is Pond Boss and our advertisers and people that are involved in Pond Boss Magazine. But I also have Bob Lusk Outdoors. So we can, you know, depending on where you are, if we can't help you through Bob Lusk Outdoors, if you send me an email at info@pondboss.com, I'm going to send you a list of vendors that are in your area that can help you. So keep that in mind. Thanks for reminding me of that, Chris. You know, sometimes I forget that I'm here marketing, and you're a marketing guy, you know, and so there we go. Roy Worthy, what do you think about the sludge-reducing bacteria for an 80-year-old pond? You know, I think that sludge-reducing bacteria is a good idea. Now, the thing about it, hello, Karen Wisher, glad to see you're here, checking in. She helps us with our marketing. Red Mango, check out Red Mango if you have a company and you want some marketing, especially in the agricultural field. Karen Wisher is outstanding. That's what she does. She helps manage our Facebook page, our social media. She helps us with our websites. She's a true pro at that and very, very good at it. Let's see here. I think bacteria is outstanding. Now, in today's world, in today's market, it just in the last 20 years, there have been some major improvements in the products that are available with bacteria. Aquafix, C-Pro. There's a bunch of different companies that produce it. And what you need to know there is that there's services that are associated with that where they can analyze the kind of bacteria that you have and help you find what it is you don't have. Now, when you start talking to water quality guys like Dr. Boyd at Auburn, what he's going to tell you is the majority of the bacteria that you need, microbes, are already there. What I'm going to tell you is they reproduce exponentially, and when they run out of food, they die. Then there's a buildup of food, and it may take a while for them to build up again. So I do believe that there's times that you can add some bacterial products to help expedite the cleansing of an old pond like that. Now here's the caveat. An 80-year-old pond, there may be 10% of that that's organic that the microbes can get rid of. So you're probably not going to increase the volume of your pond a lot with bacteria, but what you will do is you'll increase the health of it. So I think that's a good reason to do it. Scott Lindsay, holy cow, when you talk for 45 minutes in a row, your vocal cords start barking at you. Let's see. Scott says, I had a quick hard rain thunderstorm this afternoon, South Cackalack. Beat all the algae off the surface of my pond. This evening is the best my pond has looked since I constructed it. Fertilizer kicked in nicely, watercolor is perfect, and fish are growing like weeds with my Texas Hunter feeder going. Thanks to all the advice from the pond boss. Right on, man. You got it going on. Now, the reason that algae disappeared is typically those algae mats that are floating on top are dead. And when it rains, it changes the temperature, it breaks up the gas bubbles and causes them to sink. So that's a good thing. Now, Karen is telling me that I need to talk about myself and the consulting that I do. All right, let me do that. This is my 39th year as a professional fisheries biologist in the private sector. I travel the nation helping people design, build, stock, and manage private fishing lakes. And that's my living. You know, the other thing is Pond Boss Magazine, which we talk about here. Now, Pond Boss, you know, I love to promote other people's businesses and help them. You know, just also keep in mind that part of what I do is I get to run around and spend time managing fish. I mean, one of my favorite things is to hop on a plane, go to Napa, spend time at the Jordan Winery with their 14-acre lake and help them get it like they want, and then head over to North Carolina and help Jim Morgan with that lake, and then scoot back to South Texas on a ranch near Laredo and work on one there. So it's huge fun, and that's what I do. And I have a small company where I have 2 full-time biologists, a business manager, bookkeeper, receptionist, people that can help you get your pond like you want it. So Karen's nudging me to do that, and I appreciate it. So yes, we're able to help you in a whole lot of ways that we can. Greg Grimes is in the same business in Georgia, and he's saying he and I are listening while headed south. Well, good for you. I'm glad you guys are. Matt is an astonishing, seasoned taskmaster fisheries biologist that has made Greg Grimes who he is. I'm on record for that, Matt. You guys chuckle about that as you roll down the road. Let's see here. Robert Todd Dillard. Love to fish. I love to learn about species and your knowledge of fish. I would love to fish in one of your ponds. You know your stuff. Well, that's kind of a left-handed invitation. Sure. You know, my wife would tell you this, and I'm kind of like the plumber that has a leak. You know, yes, I do have some good fish, and yes, we do. I mean, Debbie and I live on 12 acres. We have 8 ponds. I don't like to mow, and I am the pond boss. You know, so we've got ponds that we swim in. We got one we swim in by the house. We've got, you know, a catfish pond that happens to have some pretty big copper-nosed bluegill in it as well. We've got an experimental pond that we play with. We got a couple of culture ponds where we grow bluegill and some tilapia and things like that. So, yeah, will I invite you? I don't know. Let's see. Clint Loveday. I have a visiting blue heron. Is it a problem? Oh, man, I got to tell you a story. One time when I was at Kingfisher, oh, gosh, this had to be 2007. Our house at Lusk Lodge Comatue burned down in 2005. We rebuilt, moved back in it. We started rebuilding it. It burned out in November of 2005. We started rebuilding it, moved back into it April of 2007. So this was probably May, June of 2007. I'm at Kingfisher Society in North Carolina, and Debbie calls me. She says, Lusk, where's your shotgun? I've got a 410 my dad gave me a long time ago, and it didn't get burned in the fire. So I said, why do you want my shotgun? She says, there's this big, tall, gray bird out there, and it just caught about a half-pound bluegill and ate it, and I want to shoot it. So I said, well, honey, that's a great blue heron, and they're federally protected, and besides, he's just trying to make a living. So don't. Hey, David Ricks, we're about ready to schedule some time at Kingfisher. I'm sitting here talking about Kingfisher. Bear Brundrett is here. Good to see you, Bear. So I got home a few days later, and Debbie loves to have coffee out on the back porch overlooking the swimming pond where these big bluegill are, some of them. And the feeder went off about 7, and I mean, here comes the Great Blue Heron, glides in, stops in front of the feeder, spears about a 3/4 pound bluegill, throws it up on the shore, and starts to eat it. Well, it can't swallow it. It's going to have to peck it to death. So I go in, grab my 410, walk out. She says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I think I'm going to shoot that bird." She says, "Oh, no, you can't shoot lurch." She had named the damn bird lurch. Well, the bottom line is a Great Blue Heron is not going to affect the population of your fish. Now, what it will do is it will condition itself and train itself to be there when the feeder goes up. So what I decided to do is, instead of setting the feeder to go off during daylight hours for a while, I changed it to after dark. And that solved that problem. That bird went to roost and my fish got to feed, because they'll come to the feeder after dark. So, Great Blue Heron is really not a big deal. And you know what? They're territorial. So you won't, if you had 50 Great Blue Herons around the pond, it would eat you out of house and home. But they're only going to wade out to where their feathers get wet, and that's as deep. And they're going to eat fish in shallow water, which is typically smaller fish. The reason they got our fish is because the fish came to the feed in shallow water. You know, we could be feeding over deeper water, but we didn't. You know, so blue herons are solitary and they'll take their defend their territory. So let's see here. Jason Nepstad, I have a floodlight about a foot above the water on the end of my dock, and at night I can see a large ball of extremely small white-looking dots. Has to be in the thousands. I would think it was zooplankton or something similar. Carp and turtles will hang out at the light feeding on these organisms. Any idea what they are? They're Daphnia. Look up Daphnia. And what they are is they are zooplankton. They're actually tiny little insects that come up, and I've seen videos. As a matter of fact, Bruce Condello sent me a video the other day where his zooplankton like that were creating a vortex under his light, and it was stunning. He's got a green monster fish light actually, and those things, you know, sit under the water a couple of feet and just exude a green, powerful light up. Well, he was sent a video of these Daphnia just in looked like a little tornado under the water. But those are outstanding food for your young of the year fish, especially bass, bluegills, fish like that. So Jason, look up Daphnia, Google Daphnia at the University of Google and see if that's what they are. I think they probably are. David Ricks, can't wait for Kingfisher. I can't either. I'm ready to firm up that date. Let's get going. All right, anybody got any more questions? If you do, throw them at me. I'm going to pitch a couple of more topics out there. Greg. Hey, Greg Rhyme just took a pot shot at you, Dave. I took one at him. Now he's throwing one at you. He said you got to learn how to fish. Well, the good news is when you go to Kingfisher, they're guides. They're guides that know where the fish are. You know, as cool as that lake is, and as beautiful as that lake is, and as old as that lake is, you'd think it's like fishing in a barrel, but it's not. It's not. Jim Liner, I use green monster lights. You know what? That's where I first saw the green monster fish lights. I remember, and I think you were there that night. There were several of us that came to Ray's place, and we got there just at dusk. He said, "Hey, come here, look at this." So we walked out to the edge of the water right there by his house, and he had 3 green monster fish lights. And what was stunning is there were hundreds of largemouth bass circling the perimeter of those lights. And those bass were anywhere from 10 inches to probably 3 pounds, and they were just going in a circle, counterclockwise. I'll always remember that. So they handed us a fishing pole, and we threw a crankbait out there, and I mean, every cast, the fish hit it. You know, so it was pretty cool just to see that. So I'm going to start wrapping things up. I got a little bit of housekeeping. Pond Boss Magazine. Please subscribe. $35 a year. Good stuff. Hey, Greg, while you're driving, let Matt type a nice testimonial about this magazine, because everybody needs to know about it. Everybody needs to get it. And $35 a year, I tease people because, you know, like last weekend, I guess it was last Friday, Debbie and I went out to dinner. We were down in near Austin, Texas, and we spent $40-something for supper on a Friday night. Well, heck, this is only $35 and it lasts a year. Supper lasts how long? You know, so check out your resources at pondboss.com, this Facebook page. A lot of articles on pondboss.com, as well as the discussion forum, Ask the Boss. So, I think we've covered most of the questions for today. Tory Rhodes, some folks sell Daphnia. Is it worth it? You know, it's worth it if you have the food that Daphnia eat. You know, Daphnia, one thing I have learned about Daphnia is they're not always there. So buying some and stocking them some could be a really good idea. So yeah, Chris Blood, Pond Boss has awesome recipes too. I'm going to show you one here. You guys are going to love this. Hold on, let me find it here. In this latest issue of the magazine, look at this. Peruvian ceviche. This issue of the magazine. This tells you ways you can take some fish that you raise and make some Peruvian ceviche. And the reason it's in here is because I spent some time with Chris Blood and his wife Mary, and that's Mary's recipe. So check it out, would you? Okay, let's see. Joanne Pelafont, our winner. I don't know if you heard it or not, but you won the cap and the mug this time. You said we have one orange koi in our pond with a couple of snapping turtles. The ecosystem is pretty balanced. Can we add another koi? Yes, you can. If you'd like to do that, and if you have other fish, be sure and add koi that are big enough that they won't get eaten by the other fish. Dennis Backshees, my son-in-law. Hey, Dennis, good to see you, man. Let's see. Jason Nepstead, how do I get Bob Luss to stop by our lake on the way to Kingfisher? You invite him. Invite him, and he'll probably do it, especially if you're willing to write a little bit of a check, because that's the way I make my living. Greg Grimes, Pond Boss is the best money you can ever spend on managing your pond. And I quote you. That's outstanding. I appreciate it, man. Let's see. Bobby Barber. I'm a newbie. I'm for sure subscribing. Outstanding. Please do. And, you know, another thing that goes along with subscribing to Pond Boss, I don't advertise this, but when somebody's a subscriber and you send an email to me, I'll answer it. Now, I may not answer it the same day you send it because I do have to go out and make a living, but I will answer it. A lot of times, most of the in the magazine, we've got a column we call Ask the Boss. Let me see if I can find it in here real quick. There it is right there. And what I do is I take all these questions that people send, and I'll answer them right there in this column. So if you send me a question, odds are really, really high that I am going to answer that question and put it in this column. So your take-home points are there are plenty of external factors that can affect your pond. Your job is to think about that, figure out what they are, and then make decisions to help your pond adjust. We don't keep our water, we borrow it. Our job is to help keep it clean and manage the pond based on your goals. So hey, thanks for tuning in. We're almost to an hour, and since we're kind of coming to a stopping point, remember, set a reminder on here on Facebook. I won't be here Wednesday night, but Monday night, May 21, and thanks to Joanne for setting me straight on that, because I typed in April. Well, I'm only a month behind. But Monday, May 21, next Monday, I will be at the Purina Research Farm with their PhDs and research people and some of the marketing guys, and we're going to be talking about fish and wildlife. And we'll be broadcasting from the dock on their 6-acre lake outside of Gray Summit, Missouri. So thanks for tuning in tonight, and I look forward to seeing you Monday. And spread the word. Share this onto your timeline if you don't mind. Hey, Mark Dauber, Jim Liner's on here with you. You guys need to go have a beer. Ray came by a few nights ago. I love him. Well, good to see everybody. I look forward to seeing you again next Monday from the Purina Farm. And thanks to Purina for their sponsorship, and thanks to Texas Hunter for being a supplier, a vendor, and a supporter of this website, this Facebook Live broadcast. See you Monday.